me okay? Sound all right? A little louder. I really like to hear myself talk. There it is. Okay, well, thanks for coming. I'm just kidding. Okay, we are going to wrap this up with a panel, but first, I want to let you guys know the funny little intros we did were actually written by each of the speakers, got assigned one of the other speakers, and they got to write their own intros. So we had fun with that. So who doesn't love the Angular team? Stand up if you don't love the Angular team. Nobody. They all love you. See? I told you, Igor. All right. So us organizers, we were...
standing.
Yeah. Says the guy in a comfortable chair while I stand here. It's not? Good. All right, so we wanted to do something nice for the Angular team because these guys and gals work tirelessly to make amazing tools for all of us, right? So we were racking our brains thinking, what can we get them? What can we do for them? And we came to the conclusion that the best gifts are the ones that are expensive. And if you don't have money, after that, the next best is the sentimental kind. So,
wait, is it sleep?
Huh?
Sleep.
Sleep.
That's
yeah.
what we want.
You can have plenty of that this weekend, Brad. Promise. All right. So what we did is we made something for him. And the story behind this, when I was a kid, when I was about 8 years old, my dad is a potter, right? So he taught me how to make these little ocarinas out of clay. And we were pretty poor, growing up. And in 7th grade, I wanted a trampoline so bad, and we just couldn't afford it. So I practiced and practiced and practiced. I made hundreds of these silly little whistles until I got really good at it. And I took them to school and I sold them to my friends at school and I bought a trampoline. And it's been kind of an obsession ever since then. So I want to kind of show you how that's done. So this is what we made for the Angular team. These are ceramic ocarinas. First you make them, they're all made by hand. You make them out of clay, let them dry, put them in the kiln. This is the kiln in my basement. Luckily, I didn't burn down my house while doing this. After they're bisqued, they look like that. And then you glaze them, and there's a close-up of the glaze. Then you put them back in the kiln, careful not to be touching any of the kiln shelves, otherwise the glaze actually melts during the process and will run everywhere if you're not careful. Fire the kiln to 2200 degrees Fahrenheit. It takes about 12 hours. And when you're done, they look like that. And there's a close-up. So we made one of these for each of the team and a little book that shows them how to play it. Your kids are mostly going to love this. So if you have kids, or if you're like Igor, you're going to love it. So I had to give one for Igor and one for each of his kids because I knew he wouldn't be sharing it. So, Sonny, why don't you come and give those each to them? And so I expect a little concert. I expect you to be good by the next ng-conf. While they're passing those out, I got one. I'll show you what it sounds like. Love you guys. Beautiful. And Igor, the ones for your kids are actually perfectly tuned so they can annoy you a ton. No, they're in the same exact key, so you can play little duets and stuff. They'll like it. All right, let's end this with a panel. So we've taken some questions from Twitter, and we've got some mics. So if you have a question in the room and you were too lazy to tweet it, go talk to Aaron, and we'll just kind of go back and forth. And I don't know, Brad, you want to kind of decide who takes what? Okay. First question. When is Angular 2 coming out?
It's right after that template compiler gets done. So that'll be your key. You'll know.
The template compiler.
Yeah.
All right. So when those stars align, we'll know.
We'll play you a song.
We're going to go back, and we're going to work on that thing.
Sweet. I hope you take the weekend off at least first. All right. Is anybody in the room yet? No? If you have questions, come talk to Frosty and we'll form a line. Okay. Where do you see the progression of PWAs going with Angular? Will it become less important in the future to build native mobile apps?
That's the hope, is that the web platform continues to catch up in ways that native leads right now. In terms of our own support for PWAs, we're focusing on the 3 areas of app shell architecture, building tooling for that, service workers, building good tooling and strategies for that, and then installable apps. In the future, I think we'll continue to focus on the performance critical areas, like looking at service worker and HTTP2 and what kind of strategies we can employ to have efficient updating of applications and pre-caching and things like that. And also continuing to focus, like working with Patrick and Jeff on Universal to have a full end-to-end pre-rendering or pre-building and taking over at the browser side. And then web workers is another big performance area that we've been focusing on. So beyond that, probably focusing more on data model offlining, whereas right now we're focusing a lot on just static asset offlining.
Awesome. Okay, next question. When is Angular 2 coming out? Just kidding. All right, what is the future of $Q and promises in Angular 2?
Igor or Rob? Yeah, Rob.
Is Rob here? Okay.
Yeah, Rob's here.
So $Q is the promise implementation in Angular 1 for those that don't know. In Angular 2, we actually don't need a custom promise implementation because by now all of the evergreen browsers already implemented promises natively, so you can just use those. And the reason why you don't need to do anything special is because zones know how to integrate the native promises with Angular. Rob could probably talk about observables and how we think about promises and the future of promises.
I think that we'll keep supporting promises because there are cases where they make sense, but I think that we will push very hard for observables as well. I think that them together is a very, very nice pattern, observables. But yeah, like I think that.
Right. So there are use cases
they don't need to be special, right? Like now we're just going to use what the language gives us going forward, and hopefully we'll have observables in the language.
All right, awkward silence after that answer. Is the offline compilation already available in RC1?
Yes, we do have something published right now. It's not quite ready to use. There's a couple big bugs we didn't get out before the conference. RC2 will probably be the first chance to give it a try for real. I suspect there will still be a few more cycles of finding and fixing issues. I was working with the Ionic guys yesterday to see how their extensions to the component annotation are going to work. We have other partners to work with to make sure that they can hook things up. And then obviously we need to do things with build tooling so that you can mix and match, for example, using Webpack. Right now our demo was just using rollup, but we want to also make it work with Clojure compiler. And we also need to write documentation so that you know what to do.
Cool. How does lazy loading work with bundling?
So most of the bundlers have a concept of splitting bundles into multiple chunks. If you take, for example, UMD bundles can be composed, so that works just fine. Webpack has a notion of splits and code splits and can understand how to load different chunks and combine them together. System Builder does the same thing. So all of these bundlers that we use today have some notion of combining multiple chunks. So it's just a matter of loading the chunks at the right time and then continuing the application from the time once the code arrives to the browser.
Got it. Okay, is ng helping influence browsers to bake in more native binding of objects to DOM or other related items? What are you guys doing to make the web better, basically? No. Are you guys working to pushing for more native bindings of objects to the DOM or other related objects?
Data binding, like is object observe a thing in the future?
Oh, is object observe a thing of the future? I think object observe has been taken out of TC39, so it's no longer part of the thing. It turns out that when you do data binding, the order of things matters. And you want to make sure that you go from the root to the children, so you have a predictable data flow. And the Object Observe API didn't have a concept of this kind of a direction. So that was kind of its flaw that was not exactly obvious at the very beginning.
And on the subject of like the web APIs in general, I think that what we hope is that things like service workers and web push and background sync and all these things, like we want to make it easy to use these things and increase adoption that way. And I think that if we can make it easy to use those kind of APIs that can be complicated sometimes, then other browsers will pick it up, right? Like we want to make sure that it's easy to use these APIs that exist and keep pushing more APIs into the platform, for sure.
They liked that one. All right. So I can see benefits to Angular 2 as a developer, but do you have any advice for convincing management to move to Angular 2? I actually have one. You get a piñata, and you practice your speech. No, this one's probably for you, Brad. Any advice for convincing managers?
No, it's all you.
Jules?
Any advice for convincing managers? My mind.
Let me start off, and then you can correct me where I've screwed it up. So I think managers want to see that somebody else has already been successful with implementing this thing. So I don't want to be the first out there on something that's marked as beta. And we, early on we didn't have much in terms of deployment, but now we have this awesome set of people who are already implementing and deploying. And for Google, our big one is AdWords, and it's the biggest moneymaker Google has. So it's probably the biggest moneymaker app on the planet, already deploying on Angular 2. And at this conference, we heard in the keynote from the Weather Channel and Capital One and Lucidchart and all of these folks. Fidelity was up on the slides. So you can now actually point at a whole bunch of big folks who are working on this, working with us to ensure all of those use cases work. And so really the risk is low. And I think Mishko is always, hey, our move from beta to release to final is words. And a lot of these things are beaten down. We're being really open with you guys about what's not there. It's template compiler, and maybe there's your favorite thing that's not there, and that's how I would go about it, is to say, there are big companies betting their livelihoods on this. And so obviously a lot of the use cases are done. And so what we should do as a company is look at it from the use cases that we need to see if it's there for us.
The only thing I'd add to that is that at least the managers that have approached me directly for this conversation, and that's actually what I usually say, is they also want to know that there's the resources necessary to get their teams over to Angular 2. So that's why we made such a big push before RC to make sure that there was already Angular 2 training, that we had worked with those trainers to make sure that it's how we recommend you approach not only the upgrade but using Angular 2. And then the other thing that I was getting asked a lot, and Brad sort of mentioned this in the interview if you saw it yesterday, is that it's not an either or. We were getting a lot of, oh, well, my manager's telling us we have to make a decision between React and Angular or Ember and Angular or whatever the framework that they were looking at is. And I think as the team has hopefully communicated this week is we work with all those teams, and so it's not an either or decision, and that should make managers a little bit easier to convince.
Yeah, and they can come talk to our developer advocate folks over here, Rob and Steven, who are there to help reason with it and figure out, does it fit my needs?
So from your perspective, would you say that Angular 2 release candidate is production ready today?
For many of our big clients, yes. And like with any, look, we don't know all the use cases, so maybe there's something that doesn't work for you. You kind of have to own that part. But yeah, there's a ton of big folks using it.
Awesome. That was a yes. Okay, well, on that same topic, what things has Angular 2 done to make migrating from Angular 1 to Angular 2 easier than migrating to, say, Ember or React or some other option?
So we have this thing called ng-upgrade that allows you to mix and match Angular 1 and Angular 2 components. There are some restrictions, it's not magical, right? But it does mean that you can take an Angular 1 app and decide that a particular service gets converted to Angular 2. So we have bridged the injectors. We have also made sure that you can bootstrap an Angular 1 component instead of Angular 2 and vice versa, Angular 2 component instead of Angular 1. The injectors are bridged so you can inject different things. And so what you can do is you can start with an app and convert individual components or services one at a time while the application is still functioning. There's a good demo on the Angular I/O on how this can be done and to give it a try. So I think the ng upgrade should go a long way towards this goal.
We should also mention all the work that has been done in Angular 1, where many features that we came up with in Angular 2 were backported back to Angular 1, thanks to Pete and Jorge and Martin and many other people. So if you are working with Angular 1 applications today, you actually can start using many of the features that were introduced in Angular 2, and you can use them in Angular 1 today. So that's going to make it easier for you to start using Angular 2 once you're ready for it.
And I think, like, on a philosophical level, Max Lynch, who works for Ionic, wrote a really, really good blog post you should read, and it's called something like Angular 2, or Angular is a design pattern. And I feel like, for all the talk of syntax changes and everything like that, if you're an Angular 1 developer, you pretty much already know how to use Angular 2, right? Like, it's something that the ideas are the same, the philosophy is the same, and it's really just like, when you get into Angular 2, you'll be very, very comfortable. So if you've got a dev team full of Angular 1 devs, they'll migrate their brains to Angular 2 very, very, very easily. And I think that's an important thing to say.
One more thing. So like Jules said, we have invested a lot in training. On our site, there's a very nice cookbook article put together by Taro that walks you through how you migrate an app from Angular 1 to Angular 2. And many of our training partners, like Wrangle and ThoughtRam and others, have actually built guides and can, like, in class, walk you through this porting process. So we really want to support it from, the infrastructure to our docs to our training partners. We think we're going to do a good job. You guys should tell us what else you need to be successful, because we want this whole community to come over to Angular 2 because it's awesome.
Very cool. Okay, let's take one from the audience here. Go ahead and say your name and question.
This is Zach. Hello. Hey, this is Zach. Just talked about performance. One of the questions I had, now that we have HTTP 2 coming out, do you see bundling dying? And what else can we do to further cache as much as we can of the application?
Igor or Jeff? Actually, maybe Jeff's been looking at this the most.
Yeah, our hope is, or our dream is, that one day, bundling could go away. Everything could be loaded individually, and you would actually be loading the parts of Angular that you need at runtime. Right now, it's not quite there. Browsers are really focusing on this, though. Firefox, Chrome, we talk to regularly. We do some of our own measurement of what the cost is of doing it this way, and we share that with them. So browsers are working on making that a reality, making sure it can be as fast or faster than bundle strategies. And we're also starting to think about how we can make service worker play well with HTTP2, particularly with HTTP2 push, making it efficient, only pushing things that aren't already cached, and a few other things with that as well. So yeah, we're hopeful. Hopefully we see a lot of progress in that in the next year or two.
Let's do one more here.
Hello, my name is Andreas. I'm a bit concerned about the world of languages that we got now with Angular 2. When we learn Typescript, okay, that's quite, I like it. But I had bad experiences with CoffeeScript before. I had lots of effort to get that out of my code base. So, yeah, really, and I have to, that's a real concern for our developers, what we shall use the next language again. So what is your opinion on the development of the language JavaScript itself? Will that merge in the future? Will that be one of the languages that compile down to stuff like ASM.js? Or yeah, where are you going? Are you working on getting TypeScript into the standard process of JavaScript, or will the Chrome browser at any point in time maybe accept native TypeScript, for instance, as a file, a source file, without compiling it?
There's probably a question for each of you in there.
Yeah, start Rob.
So,
Thanks.
I mean,
That
I
was
think
a
that,
question.
sorry. So I think that like my first answer to that would be, I would strongly recommend, if you're going to use Angular 2, using TypeScript. Like that's my first answer, right? But I think that the nice thing about TypeScript, and you mentioned CoffeeScript, right? And I think that there's a very large difference to be mentioned between CoffeeScript and TypeScript, and that is like if you forget about the types in TypeScript, then it's JavaScript, right? Like that's the big thing about TypeScript, I think, for us, is that you get the benefits, but if you decide one day that you no longer want to use TypeScript, right, it's one transpiler step, and then you've got a pure ES6 code base, right? And I think that that's a big thing. Maybe somebody else should talk about like the language as a standard is probably not my discussion, but I think from a dev point of view, like it's so productive and so awesome, and there's very little risk for me in using TypeScript. And 6 months ago, I wouldn't have said that, right? And I think that they've made huge strides to be ES6 ready and working with us, that I think it's the best choice for Angular 2 for sure.
So one way to think about TypeScript is it's an exact superset of ES6 or ES whatever, because they're tracking the standard. If you ever don't like it, you can look at the output. You notice it looks like what you would have written by hand with just the type stripped out, and so you could always just run it through the compiler past ES6 and just check that in and move along as if nothing had happened. As far as standards go, like we think about this, we talked to Anders and the team a bunch about it. It's a little unclear to us what the browsers would do if it was in it. You kind of don't want it there because it's big, so you would probably strip it out for production anyway. You might want it there as a developer. But there's nothing, it would only be for kind of, if I don't like a little nicer than source maps is what you would get out of it. We actually, the Chrome team did a really in-depth experiment to see could types and even strong types implemented in the browser be helpful. And kind of the answer that came back was no. And we talked about this at the last TC39 meeting that I was in. And so like it was kind of a revelation. Like there's just too many roadblocks to get value out of it in terms of like maybe performance optimization or other interesting things like that. So I think there might be value in it being a standard, but maybe not part of TC39, maybe being another standard. That's just personal opinion on top of other stuff.
All right, the next one is, what keeps all of you guys working at Google when there's so many other opportunities? You probably have a lot of recruiters. I wouldn't want to see your LinkedIn inbox.
Naomi, do you want to talk about why you're here?
Free food.
Really?
Is it on? On? Yes, it's on, okay. I have the worst commute. It takes, if you go at rush hour, it takes 2.5 hours to get to Google. And I've been at Google for 9 years now, almost 10. And I kept thinking, well, I'll probably, this will be good and I'll leave. But what keeps me there is I get to work on problems at Google that are on a scale that blows my mind. When you look at what we're doing on Angular, we have the potential to really change how front-end web development is done for the world. And being able to work on that is such a joy and a privilege that even when it gets hard, it's worth that crazy commute. And working with these people, working with all of you in the open source community and having that be my job, that gets me up in the morning.
Yeah, we're not going to do better than that. Let's go next question.
All right, and then what is your number one biggest regret after having worked on Angular 2 for the last couple years?
Oh, Mishko, what do you got, man?
Mishko's your biggest regret? Is that, I'm pretty sure that's what I heard.
I asked Mishko what his biggest regret is.
Oh.
His biggest regret is working with me, probably, but...
Good recovery.
Any regrets? Anyone? We're all very positive people.
I know. We're trying to break that shell and get to the good stuff. Okay, if you think of one. All right, does the Redux/Reducer architecture have a place with Angular 2?
Yes, it does. Yeah, I think that it does. We were just having a conversation out in the hall with the Wrangle folks about they have Redux, and I not just me, but the people who contribute to NGRX. Yes, and I think that like in a larger sense that not just Redux, but there's a lot of things that all these JavaScript communities can learn from each other. Like there's a lot of React versus Angular, and I think that like Redux and some of the stuff that comes out of the React land is incredibly interesting stuff that we as Angular developers should all take a look at. We should all learn from that. And yeah, so yes is the short answer to that question. Yes is the long answer to that question.
I think they're doing a lot with that very thing at Netflix, aren't they?
Yes.
Okay, of all the improvements in Angular 2, what's your favorite? What are you most proud of?
Observables.
I like how toolable it is and the speed of improvements we have made.
Nobody else is proud.
No,
really.
I think like the overall architecture and how it all hangs together, like we've tackled more problems than we've ever tackled before. So the fact that we can do universal, that works with web workers, that works with animations, that's all super fast, I'm really proud of that.
I would chime in and say the static analyzability of the framework is really, I think, the hugest thing that is different about Angular 1 that lets you do incredible optimizations and developer experience improvements that weren't possible before.
I really like that we were able to get rid of a lot of stuff, like the $Q that we mentioned before. Like in Angular 1, we had to make up many of these things or reinvent the wheel. In Angular 2, we don't need to do that anymore, and I think that's really cool.
I was going to add that it's finally a framework I don't have to be embarrassed about.
Can I?
The other thing I would say is that you said this to me in the office the other day. We were like polishing up the last couple steps of something, and you looked at me and you said something like, "This is so cool because nobody else is doing this, right? Like nobody else is in the position that we're in right now." And I think that the next 2 years of Angular are going to be just ridiculously exciting because we built a really cool platform, and the kind of stuff that people are going to build on top is going to be pretty rad, I think. So go do that, all of you.
It seems kind of prosaic to say this because it's such an obvious thing everything needs, but I'm really, really proud of what Ward's been able to achieve on the docs, bringing a team of people together and delivering docs that are really addressing your needs in a way that I think on Angular 1 we weren't able to do. I think we've come a long way, and I'm really excited to see. We have a lot still to do, but I'm really, really proud of how far the docs have come on Angular 2.
For me, I think that it's, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I find the core abstractions of Angular 2 are just much simpler than those in Angular 1. Like looking at templates, I can see, what is data binding to a property, what the events are. The structural directives are much clearer. I find it's just much easier to understand the concepts of Angular 2 versus Angular 1.
So that actually leads very well into the next question, which is, are you guys worried at all that Angular 2 will be harder to learn for a new developer than Angular 1 with new concepts like observables, decorators, TypeScript, etc.?
So, as I said, I was only half joking about not being embarrassed about the first framework. There are certain things that you will have to unlearn, like the $scope, $apply, and all those things that... So I think it is simpler, but if you're brand new, I've never seen Angular before, I think learning Angular 2 is relatively straightforward. If you're coming from Angular 1, you might have to like relearn a couple of things and unlearn a few things.
So I would add, when I joined the team, I hadn't worked with Angular before, so I went down the path of like, oh, I need to learn this, and I need to learn it in a weekend, and I started taking Angular 1 courses, and I came in on a Monday, and Brad said, if you just learned Angular 2, there's like 57 things you don't have to know anymore. And I was like, forget this Angular 1 thing, I'm just going to go forward with Angular 2 because it was so much easier, and if I look at Angular 1 code now, I'm able to understand it, but there's just so much stuff in there, and I think not having to learn all that stuff is really awesome, and it's going to be way easier.
The other thing is that a lot of people have talked to me, and I think that Angular as a framework is far simpler, I think that honestly, the hardest thing will be the rest of being a JavaScript developer, right? Tooling and packaging and bundling and all that other stuff. And a lot of people have said that to me, and I think probably you as well, that like we're super confident the framework is better and stronger and easier to learn, but I think we also are now very aware, even more so than we were, that like tooling is a thing that we need to handle, and we want to handle for you where we can, right? So I think that we'll try to take that next step for you, I think, of making that easier to deal with.
One thing I'd add is that I think there's a lot of things that you should be doing if you're building any sort of JavaScript application now, right? Progressive web applications, server-side rendering for the first run of an application. And those things were really hard in Angular 1. And they're hard a little bit in Angular 2, but we're trying to make it easier, and we're building the tooling that makes that easy.
Okay, so you are all superheroes to this community. Who are your heroes?
Brad.
Maybe when you're a hero, you don't need a hero.
Victor Safkin. He couldn't be here, but he's my hero. Taro.
Was that in my head, that wind chime? Because I've been hearing
this
that.
is a little bit pandering, but some of you actually dove into Angular 2 way before it was ready, and you give us a lot of feedback, so thank you. I don't know if that's hero worship, but you guys did dangerous things that we're not sure it was going to pan out well.
And I guess I would say, like, from because I'm the observable guy, right? Like, Matt Potozaki for RX and Ben Lesh for, like, redoing RX for us. They've been huge partners for us, and that's awesome. And then I think, like, on a personal note, Dan Abramov, who does Redux, right? Like, he's a big person for me, right? And I've learned a huge amount from those guys, so.
I want to add Tobias, who's not here with us at ng-conf, has been doing a lot of great work over the past few months.
Yeah, the offline compiler is mostly based on his work to take the online compiler and make it powered by static reflection. So +1 to Tobias. I'm hoping we can name it the Tobiler because it's so awesome.
And I would come in and say,
sorry.
You first.
I was going to tell a little story about Tobias that, you know, every time he comes to the office, he's like, I have an idea, Mishko. It's like, what's your idea? I'm going to rewrite the compiler. And I'm like, okay. And he always refactors that thing, and it's like twice as faster than it was before. It's like, how do you do that over and over again? Like, at some point, you got to hit a limit.
Yeah, I would say Frosty and Dave and Joe Eames and Sonny and everybody else who was involved with organizing this conference. Woo! We wouldn't be able... Like you all, everybody who was involved in organizing this made this happen 3 years ago from nothing and made the Angular conference thing happen. And it's wonderful that all of these people can be here and be a part of this.
Thank you. I stopped listening past Dave, so whatever else you said, I agree with it. Okay, what do you guys love best about the Angular community? And maybe what would you like to see changed? To end on a negative note.
You know, the places I like the Angular community best is where I see collaboration, where people come together to build things. And, you know, we get involved in some of the places like the docs. Like some of our favorite people have written docs and cookbooks and things for us. And then Universal and the CLI. I would love to see more of that. I would just love to see folks organize into groups where you see a problem, find a way to be a leader, and bring other people with you along.
So, like, I got started on Angular on IRC back in the day, on like #AngularJS, yeah. And that's where I learned Angular, and just being in that community and helping people. And then the same things happened on Gitter with Angular 2, right? There are thousands of people in that room every day, helping people, answering questions. Everybody's kind of learning together. And I think that's the best thing about the Angular community, is that there's like, what, 20 of us? And we can't teach you everything. But then we have this like force multiplier of this awesome community who teaches everybody. And it's brilliant, so keep doing that.
Okay, we'll take one for the audience unless we have anyone else that wanted to answer that last one. Okay.
Hi, I'm Naresh, and I was really surprised that no questions have come up for material yet. And it's so awesome that Angular is beautiful, but giving a very high quality front-end library is equally important. So I really want to thank the material team right there for doing such a great job with coming up with the beta.
Okay, one more right here.
Awesome. Hi. Well, first off, thank you. And secondly, I had a practical question when it came to ng upgrade, which still kind of blows my mind. But if you're working on an Angular 1 application that is going to stay Angular 1 for about a year, is it still, but it will eventually go to 2. Is it worthwhile right now to be building components through ng upgrade in Angular 2? Or would it be better to wait until you're closer sort of the transform and refactor?
That's a really good question.
I'll try, Robin. You can follow on. So if you move to Angular 1.5, there's this nice option where you can write your components in the style of Angular 2 without ever leaving Angular 1. At the same time, Pete and the rest of the team are working on bringing more of the APIs, like Igor mentioned. Router already exists, but animation, IETNN. There. So you can actually take advantage of a lot of the pieces of Angular 2. You might move to Typescript in your code base as another way that can help you refactor things when the time comes where the IDEs can do more work. So you can actually completely exist on an Angular 1 code base and still be preparing for Angular 2. If there are some components that you think would benefit from the speed of Angular 2, you might rewrite some of the big problematic pieces and include those in. Rob, you have other things?
No, you pretty much know.
Okay, good.
Awesome. Okay, I think we will end with just one last question, and you are all welcome to answer it, or just whoever has a thought. But what would you say, or what would you hope would be the main takeaway from ng-conf? And this is a chance for all of you to give your talks all over again. So, no. What do you think should be the main takeaway? It's okay if we have lots of different answers.
I'll try. So these conversations we've been having, this is the most magical thing for us. I hope you folks have had some value out of meeting folks who are doing what you're doing and collaborating with them. There are some awesome meetups in your neighborhood, and if there aren't, please start them. Go and be part of those meetups, give talks, find other people to give talks, because that's where we can all learn from each other and become a bigger community.
Sorry, I'm gonna. No, you go. I was going to say that that Angular is kind of grown up. It's not just for web now. It's also a full-on platform for rendering to other things than web.
I was going to say that the thing that made Angular 1 great was that there was this entire huge ecosystem of components and directives and all this stuff that people built, like lazy loading and all this stuff that we didn't build. That's I want you all to know that now you can start doing that. That's what, for me, the takeaway for me is you should go home now and all that awesome stuff you built for Angular 1, go build it for Angular 2, because it's ready to do that, right? I think. Migrate it to Angular 2, yeah? Yes. Build it.
I would like you guys all to walk away knowing that all these guys up here build this product, but it's not just about the technology. They really build it for you guys, and it drives them to get up every morning, and I've seen them stay up all night, every night, especially for the last month or so. So it's all about you, and we want to hear from you.
Yeah, I would definitely echo that and say, go build amazing things with Angular 2, and let's make the platform better together.
It looks like we have one last question from the audience. Go ahead.
It's actually for you. When is
It's for me?
ng-conf 2017?
Oh, ng-conf 2017. We've just been grounded from the Angular team by Brad, so I don't know. We'll let you know.
We were going to call it off except for that ocarina gift, and so now we should talk.
So we're back in.
Yeah, we're back in.
Yes.
We're back in.
Excellent. Okay, well, that wraps it up. Give it up for the Angular team.